I'm John Nichols from The Nation magazine, and you're going to ask me some questions.
Well, I was just going to ask you, you've seen the dream ballot for 2012 as presented by Voters Evolt. I was wondering if you had any comments, one, about the national policy referendum, and secondly, the Evolt of people taking the pledge to write in the name of their candidate, whether or not the name is on the ballot.
Well, I think that the Evolt is an especially exciting option at the primary level. One of the interesting things is that next year in states across the country there will be Democratic primaries for president. And so Barack Obama, who is certain to be the Democratic nominee, will be unopposed or very underopposed on those primary ballots. I think that's an especially creative place in which to throw a write-in candidate in. The same being true in the Republican primaries, unless of course you want to vote for Michelle Bachmann. But bottom line is that I do think that there are options for that. When you get to that November ballot, I think we all know the challenge that people will be looking at, how close the election is. Some folks will get scared, but this idea of trying to send a message through the election process is a powerful one, and it's an important one. And what really excites me, what excites me the most by any measure, is this idea of national policy referendums. I think that's a fantastic proposal. The fact of the matter is that there's countries around the world that put major issues to referendums, to initiatives, so that the citizens can weigh in. You'll see that in Europe all the time on questions of whether to join international groupings or regional groupings. You see it in Switzerland all the time on every issue from right to die to language rights to whether to distribute heroin needles to heroin addicts. They vote on all sorts of referendums there. And what I think is really troubling to me is that in the United States, we often have policy referendums at the local level, sometimes even at the state level, but we do not have it at the national level. And I go back to the views of Robert M. La Follette, the great progressive in the early years of the 20th century. La Follette believed very strongly in national initiatives and national referendums. In fact, he proposed before World War I that Woodrow Wilson should have a national referendum on whether to go to war. That old proposal from 1917 still lives in a number of kind of sometimes obscure political groupings who argue that we should have referendums before we go to war. Certainly if the nation's attacked, of course you respond. You don't play games with that. But if you're talking about an offensive war, if you're talking about the United States launching a war against another country, invading another country, why wouldn't you put that to a referendum? Let the American people vote on it. I think it's a great idea, and the fact of the matter is, if we do it, you know, and when I even talk about the war referendum, I understand the dynamics, that would be a policy referendum. It wouldn't necessarily have a binding control. I'm not sure that initiatives and referendums shouldn't have more binding control in a number of areas, but letting the people weigh in that way, I think it's very powerful and very useful. And let me give you the core reason why I think it's so powerful. And that is because so often we have unfocused debates about issues. We end up off on a side area rather than focusing on the core of it. So if we had a referendum in this country before the Iraq War saying, how do people feel about it? Do you want to go to war? Don't you want to go to war? Then the debate would be very, very focused. It wouldn't go to the side issues, it would go to the heart of it. Similarly, do you want to get rid of Medicare? Don't you want to get rid of Medicare? When you go to those heart and soul issues, I think it's much easier to frame the debate, to have a real discourse in the country. I think it forces our media to step up to the issues rather than to go off on side tracks and deviations. So there's a lot to be said for this, and I hope that the Evolt folks get a good hearing and get their message out across this country, because Robert M. La Follette, the great progressive, was right. The cure for what ails democracy is more democracy, not less. The problem in America right now is we have so many places in which we're diminishing our democracy. I'm excited about any effort that seeks to expand democracy.